Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Brian O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Hello, listeners. Thanks for joining the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Brian O'Rourke. Can you believe it's almost the end of June today here and at the home office, getting ready to head up to Boston for the International Health, Racquet, and Sports Club Association's board meeting today on the 25th of June. 2018 will be gone before you know it. I'm so glad you took time out to listen to this fun podcast because, again, I get to speak to a friend that we've been collaborating on things here and there for many years, and I know he will bring a unique perspective that I hope you enjoy listening to. Jesse Harper, who was into wearables in his days with Polar in the early 2000s before wearables was a thing. And Jesse had been with Polar in a number of roles. He's been in the fitness space since 1994, and more recently has been involved since 2012 with Athlete Intelligence, which is a pretty cool solution. It's a leading sports technology and data analytics company. And Jesse now serves as president and CEO of that business. Today, we're going to talk about trends in athletics, data, solutions, coachable moments, and other things. Jesse, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts with our listeners today.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian. Really excited to be here.
It's fun because you and I, started talking about tech before they had these kind of names associated with it over 10 years ago. Wearables, and people didn't even know what the cloud was. A lot's happened since then, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think when we met, smartphones were just coming out. It was maybe the iPhone 1. So we're going back quite a ways. Technology now is, as we know, pervasive in everything we do, and the key is how do we use it. But it's certainly been on the rapid rise for the last 10 plus years now.
It sure has, and it's great because we used to have talks every now and then about what it meant and what was coming, and you, along with a lot of other colleagues, you didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but you knew it was going to be a lot of different things, and they could really make a difference, which led me, of course, I've been following your career. We bumped into each other at airports every now and then, right?
Absolutely. I think the last time was down Baton Rouge, or it might have been Atlanta, but yeah, we've linked a couple times.
Yeah, just happenstance, but following your career and seeing your involvement with athletic intelligence, and I want to explore some of the trends around what you do, but can you explain for the listeners what is athlete intelligence and what does it do?
Yeah, so, as you noted, we're a sport tech and data analytics company. We're very focused on athlete performance and safety, but our particular focus is around head injuries and concussion. We saw an opportunity, I'm a former football player and I played a variety of sports, but football was my thing, and saw both for myself as well as when I coached, and I've got boys who play the sport, that concussions were a real issue and that there weren't great solutions for it. So we came out with some wearable technology. We started with a mouth guard. We've now, acquired a company with a helmet sensor, and we've created a secondary helmet sensor, and we've now served a bunch of different athletes from the professional level on down to 5-year-old kids, aiming to better understand what's happening on the field of play and coach these kids up so that they can stay safe and perform at their best.
Yeah, and that's a great tool, and it's such an interesting thing because safety has become an injury, especially more recently with the rise of football and the issue of CTE and what that means with concussions. How many teams are looking to adopt this kind of technology right now?
So, as well as we all know that concussion is an issue, and as much as you hear about it in the news, you can't turn on ESPN on any given day without hearing about it. it still feels nascent. It still feels new. Coaches, it's a fairly historic institution, being a coach, and they are a little bit hesitant to change at times. So the younger crop of coaches coming up are a lot more accepting of technology and new methodologies, and so you're starting to see that groundswell happen. But it takes time. I mean, we've been at this for a few years now. We spent the first 3 in R&D just trying to make the product right, and then the last 2 out in the market. We're in about 15,000 athletes right now. So we're starting to trend in the right direction. We anticipate this year adding another 17,000 athletes to the roll. So it's getting there, but it's still early.
Yeah, Jesse, and I think that's probably a dynamic, adoption in fitness in general as well. If you look at trainers or others, you're used to doing things a certain way, right? And when you bring on these new tools, it's difficult. So you have to be patient, right? Because it's just a tool that helps. But it's, I think, for some chefs in the kitchen who are used to chopping their vegetables a certain way, as an analogy, it may not be as easy as they think it might be, right? Is that where the kind of the difficulty comes in?
Yeah, people always want to understand, how does this help me? Does it make my job harder or easier? And what's the value? And so, I can liken this back to my fitness days. When I worked at Polar, we launched that Cardio GX group training solution back 10 plus years ago, way before anybody was really doing group cardio where you broadcast it up on a wall. And cool idea, but there weren't many adopters at first because they didn't know how to use it until you had someone who was a real innovator come along. Orange Theory saw that product and built a business model around group training and heart rate in group. Now they're not with Polar anymore; they're with a different product. But it's that innovation and that use case that changes it. I mean, you've seen that with things like Viper, you've seen that with things like Vertimax, and others where they started out as a really solid, scientifically based product for functional or sport performance. But it took programmatic elements in order to make it sticky.
That's right.
Do something with it.
That's right. It's the actual practical adoption and the case study cases and the uses. Then people get their aha moments and the market feels it out and you figure out the nuances of how you're doing it. And I think that, we see this in probably every industry and how that goes. So in your mind, given what you're doing now, this is the beginning, as you said, in the product. And I know you guys have a roadmap and I don't want to ask you to tell me things that are confidential. However, can you share when it comes to coaching, when it comes to the dynamic of athletic performance, where is this going in your imagination? What do you think is going to happen in the coming years?
Yeah, it's a fun time. This concept of the quantified athlete, as I call it, is not new. We've been putting tech on athletes for some time. I mean, heart rate for 30 plus years, and GPS for like 15 or more, and impact sensors like mine for around 5 to 10. So it's not new. But what the focus is today, and where I think it's going to go, is people are focused on, okay, we've got this giant set of data. We don't really know what it all means. How do we curate that? How do we look for causation and correlation? And how do we create actionable insights? What do we do with it? What's the precipitate of all of this? And so, you'll see more data being collected on athletes. You'll see everything from, there's movement and space data, heart rate, hydration levels, neurocognitive functioning, any number of things that people are collecting. But we all have to figure out, what helps us win, because that's what coaches want. What help us perform at a higher level and perhaps get that winning spot on the field or reach the next level, and that's what athletes want. And then how do we, extend our careers as long as possible, maintaining safety, which is what parents and athletes and coaches want. So it's trying to curate that information where I think this is going to go, and looking, instead of operating as individual products and islands in the market, coming together and sharing this stuff in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and when you hear the term IOT, Internet of Things, I mean, this is a great example of that. When you hear about big data, this is a great example of that. I think another interesting thing, I'm going to kind of spring this on you, Jesse. Do you see in coaching and athletics, do you see new roles, kind of like you remember Billy Ball and the movie Moneyball, the idea of analytics in performance in baseball? Do you see new jobs emerging where people are data analysts strictly in sport? Do you see that kind of thing happening?
Absolutely. I do a lot of work at the collegiate level. You would expect those types of roles at the professional level, and of course they do exist. But you're seeing more and more of it now at the collegiate level, which is really exciting. And the challenge is there's not enough people with the chops to do it yet. But there's a lot of people in school right now focused on data analytics and machine learning and these types of things. And so finding people who have both a passion for sport and the ability to look at applied mathematics and data analytics is really a key and growing role. And I think you're going to see more and more of this sport. I mean, we work here in Seattle. The Sounders, from a soccer perspective, are very tech forward, as are the Seahawks, as are the Storm. And so this is an area where we see a lot of that. Those teams have data analysts on staff. And we're seeing more and more of that down through the spectrum.
Yeah, and I'd assume that as different organizations start figuring out how to apply these disciplines, the science, the standardization, the understanding about how to apply certain things will probably trickle down into youth athletics. When you talk about creating programming for young athletes in certain sport and how you do certain things, I would imagine that there are going to be some profound insights that come out of this understanding of real data that might actually impact the way people coach and train in general.
Absolutely. I mean, research certainly drives change and growth. And, we've seen over the course of the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of sport specialization where athletes went down to playing one sport almost year round. And there's been growing research lately that doesn't help them. And the most successful professional athletes are multi-sport athletes through their career, and they work on their athletic IQ rather than honing in on one sport. And so we'll see that in other things here, whether there's certain drills that are more problematic or, yield less benefit, different behaviors, different ways to eat, sleeping patterns. All of those things are under analysis right now as we look at how we can maximize performance and safety.
Yeah, and I just think it's just so fascinating to me, the idea of how sensors are being applied and this data is being collected in so many different ways. It's really kind of a limitation. The only limitation is the amount of effort you can put into it and your imagination of just learning to gain those insights. Do you see this, this feedback moving to an app, more and more of an app base? How do you see AI and machine learning relating to that?
Yeah, so it's becoming more mainstream for people to be able to wear technology, interpret that technology, and look at how it's used. The fitness industry was way in front of the sporting industry, which is interesting. It usually goes the other way around. But you look at, Fitbit and Apple Watches and all these different things that exist, and Strava, and all these ways to interpret data and look at data. But for years, even in the fitness industry, you sold to the same 3% of the population that were data junkies and geeks and love tech. And I've bought every wearable known to man. But now it's starting to get mainstream because people are understanding how you apply it. So sport will do the same thing. Right now, you're very much at the team level. We do primarily business-to-business sales here. We're selling to teams who have the infrastructure and the knowledge to be able to do something with it. But over time, you'll start to see that move downstream, and you'll see apps where you can compare yourself to your ideal athlete that maybe you aspire to be like. Analyzing your swing versus Tiger Woods' swing, etc. That stuff's coming, and you're seeing more of it in the industry all the time.
Yeah, you really are. And then the whole idea of esports, and that's that explosive arena, and the way that you might actually, as a consumer, experience collegiate and professional sports in the future, with the ability to, for example, kind of like what they do in the Tour de France now, you can actually see the cyclist heart rate and their cadence on the screen, right? Where the interaction and the data provided to people watching the sport might heighten the experience. For
sure. We spoke to the NFL a long time ago. This must have been 13, 14 years ago about fan engagement, and they were looking for what is the next level of super statistics that we can overlay in a game in order to engage our fans in a more meaningful way. And so now you're seeing everything from like the advent of the yellow line, different graphics and applications on the field, route tracing, all of these different things where we're trying to engage fans more. And that's an exciting aspect of sport beyond just the performance and safety side. The fans really want to get involved.
Yeah, they do. And I think I think you're going to see more and more of that, don't you?
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. So any final for our listeners, because this is a great insight that I'm sure many of our listeners understand what's coming in athletics and some of these general trends, but any pearls of wisdom or thoughts about adoption, any recommendations for teams or trainers around what to be on the lookout for? Any thoughts that you would want to share?
Sure. So knowing that a large amount of your listeners, are from the health club industry, which is, as you know, where I got my start. I used to run 4 Gold's Gym franchises back in the day and, all of those types of things. I would say one thing that I tell my staff all the time, and one thing that I've learned, adversity, or I should say survivable adversity, is the driver for innovation. A new competitor opens down the street, there's staffing shortages, there's a change in local pay wages that lead to automation. These things drive innovation. The key for all of us is to learn to innovate in the absence of adversity. So, we all at the health club level, we used to collect everything from what someone's interests were and what sports they played and such. And that was just to show that prospect aspects or areas of the gym and our offering that we thought were relevant. What we didn't do was mine that data, looking for opportunities for new channels and revenue streams. And, the more I've followed yourself and the people that interact with you on a regular basis, I'm seeing some really great innovations out there from within the industry where people are saying, how do we do better before we need to do better? So learning to innovate in the absence of that adversity and get out in front of it, and data mining, I think is really critical in any industry.
Yeah, that's wisdom. Learn to innovate in the absence of adversity. That's wisdom, because oftentimes organizations haven't given themselves enough room to breathe, to figure out what they need to work on until they're in a situation they feel they're forced to do something. And boy, can you make mistakes when that happens, right?
Sure. I mean, that's when change occurs, good and bad change. So it's better to get in front of it.
That's wisdom, Jesse. Listen, I am so happy we got to catch up today. And for the listeners, Athlete Intelligence, check it out. It's great to hear from a dear friend, Jesse Harper. It's been too long, but I love the fact that we get to catch up. And I love the fact that you're part of this, cutting edge, the head of the curve with respect to how technology, sensors, the cloud, AI, data is all being applied in athletics. Jesse, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Brian. A lot of fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye. Hi, everyone. This is Brian O'Rourke again. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. The podcast is brought to you by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, as well as my company, Videri Ventures, Moon Mission Media, and others. We hope you enjoyed the content. Please feel free to share it and join us again soon when we bring to you another leader in the fitness space talking about technology and what it means to our industry. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you again very soon.